The Code to the Matrix, First Edition, The Golden Rule, by James Evans Bomar III, or Jeb Cubed. 1080 Arc Chariot, Observer of Spheres Prime Mobile. To all the youth of the world, so that you may see the path to ascension. Forward, forward, forward. The race was not given to the quick or the swift, but to the one who could endure till the end. Then we found out there was no end. The unwary soul who fails to grapple with the mocking demon of illusion will return to the earth as a slave of illusion. To become a true master of fate, you must first become a knower of self. In a time much too distant to consider, we as humans, splitting from a single source, entered duality. Spiraling away from the Creator, some spun in the direction of 6, while others spun in the opposite direction of 9. This is the spiral force. These two forms contain complete opposites. However, it is in their union something new can be born. This is the sequence of life. Our solar system houses various binary or dual worlds, and Earth, called first Tiamat, is one of them. Once entering this realm, the spirit began to develop its very narrow definition of things. As in most cases, besides twins, they are lacking their other side. In instinct, we create a stand-in, which we call the ego. The ego is wholly constructed of astral energy in which we create and breathe life into every day. At times, not knowing power, we birth a monster which we love and care for, since, after all, it is a part of us, our baby. At some point in incantations or loops, one realizes that they must begin the quest of taming the monster. They realize they must flip it over and ride it. At that moment, they also see how strong it has become, and it is stuck in its ways, rigid in form, brutish, and ineloquent. In that condition, we can take it nowhere, just as you never take a street dog into a royal party. The work before us then was to take this rough-cut stone and form it into a chariot of fire that could propel us through the center of the universe. It is there we will meet our other half. In this realm, that is the meaning to life. To help us through this whole process, in all of its components, the Most High developed a system based on the strategies of the entire universe. Seeing that humans are smaller composites of the celestial spheres, it became possible for one to know how to guide their particular life in the direction that would equal the greatest amount of potential for their unique design. In each person lies the pearl of the highest potential. If developed, it is the treasure to all existence, visible and invisible. This wondrous metamorphosis was possible of the human creation. However, as you can see in some parts of nature, not every creation has been given this ability. Thus, there arose a challenge from lower forms of consciousness that manifested as jealousy, and thus spirituality and religion were created. These were the limits. Once again, at the close of this time segment, the masses will have an opportunity to discover their true form, which is not a word and comes before even thought. It is the highest, if you but knew. Reason 1. The entire universes are known to be binary. This gives the possibility of balance and diverse continuation. The figure 8, which is the sign for infinity, is actually the sign of two worlds that we continue to reincarnate through, one after another, in an infinite loop we call stasis. Our own parallel actually exists in this other world simultaneously until it is merged with. It also remains just as clueless as you are right now to its existence. Consider hot, cold, light, and dark. Is there not warm and gray which would easily fit between the two? Not to mention in temperature, there is hot, cold, warm, vapor, freezing, and many more stages, each having a particular use, some being very beneficial for a certain moment and useless for others. If someone came to your door looking for a person that you loved to do them harm, would you tell them that they were inside, or would you lie and say they're not around? If you lied to protect that person, is that good or bad? If you ask a pastor of a church, they will say that it's evil to tell lies, period. But is it better to allow the loved one to be hurt? As you see, everything is a matter of perspective. So there can be no good and bad, only reason, and reason has many parameters. If all things are not considered, a person could be left confused, not knowing the decision to make from time to time. Thus, they are left lost in time. Whatever you do in life, let it be endowed with meaning and purpose. The world is lodged in the phase of opposites right now. Thus we face wars, racism, and an extinction of our natural life. What I'm presenting here is the information of the inner workings of the world along its creeds, cultures, and religions that have shaped our minds and actions since antiquity, extending several incarnations. We will see how ideas grow over time and sometimes lose their true meaning altogether. In this, we will see also how we've been taken off track. This due in part by the controllers, knowing if you take humans from their original cycle, they are easy to confuse and enslave. Let us not forget, we faced many conquerors in the past, intending to usurp the order of the world and bring it under their sway. This they accomplished, and it should not be forgotten no matter how much the illusion tells you it does not exist. The foolish think of me, the unmanifest, as having manifestation, knowing not my higher, immutable, and most excellent form. Fools regard me as clad in human shape, not knowing flesh cannot withstand me. They have empty hopes, vain actions, of vain knowledge, and, senseless, they verily are possessed of deceitful nature, and become undivine beings. I hurl these evildoers into the womb of distortion, deluded birth after birth, not attaining me as they fall into a condition even lower, without the slightest suspension proving that they are not using the reason and senses we gave them, the Most High. There exist certain systems, mainly language and religion, that perpetuate this fallacy of illusion in a subliminal way. If you happen to be aligned with any of the religions or ideas being discussed, do be careful not to think of it as bad if you happen to hear something that makes you uneasy. After all, many of us at one time or another in this life or in past lives have avowed ourselves to something only later find out we had outgrown it because we now possess an entirely different set of key knowledge. Every time we learn something new that is the truth, we celebrate. We are closer to home. The others. This world we are in is fully animate. It has been constructed by an ability so powerful it has missed no details. Challenge in life equals substantial growth. It is, after all, the constant lifting of heavier weights that makes a person strong. Those weights we must lift are actually other life forms that are very dense, slow-moving vibrations. Those weights, when attached to us, make us wait right here on earth, burdened down and unable to fly. Those of us who are divine positive are attracted to the light, and thus we must get light by releasing the weight. But wait! The complexity of the Creator exists within its creation, and there are many of us. On third density, we all appear to be about the same. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, etc. Although if you had the ability to see individuals' astral form, no 2 forms would look the same. Some you would see as infused with animal natures, extraterrestrial life, unknown elements and essences, and everything else that they had accumulated in the past existences, all comprised in one auric field. When that field is placed on a humanoid body, the outer shell looks similar enough to allow you to get along in society. We are all something much more different than what is seen in the mirror, so we must never be confused that the reflection is the complete you. On other dimensions, there are so many life forms they cannot be cataloged. It would be much more difficult than listing every type of insect, plant, fish, mammal, each exist on such a small planet as Earth. On their dimension, they have a spirit form. The breathe flows through all living creatures. When they take physical form, as we have, they combine with what is most like their character. The ancient knowledge was to know how they appeared in the seen world, how to communicate with them, and which ones to avoid. Many of these beings had no concern for the humanoids whatsoever themselves, being either much too dense to comprehend human life or much too developed to waste thought on something so distant and primitive. There are beings who, in fact, are closer to us in proximity of creation and also endowed with reason. They possessed a fiery and airy nature and known now as serpents. Mankind's history with the serpents is undeniable. For example, in Colombian mythology, Bashu, the primordial woman, was called Serpiente Celestial, or celestial snake. Mesoamerican cultures worship Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, as they await his return, just as Christians wait for Jesus. The Egyptians called them Netiru and said that they come from heavenly boats and set up priesthoods whose priests were called Jedi. Sound familiar? The Sumerians claimed their ancestors were reptilian Anunnaki who genetically modified them to be slaves. It is of value to keep in mind the Sumerians say that they were hybridized and made as slaves, while other legends simply say they were intermingled with their population. In Ethiopia, stories and ancient statues can be found of the serpents known as Naga. These Naga also went to Persia and China. Nagasaki was named after the serpents who migrated there. In Japan, the dragon Yasha is a protector of Buddhism. The Celts made mention of Druid adders, or great serpents that came to instruct them in mystical arts. The Hebrews speak of the serpent, Nagash, who was ever giving them trouble and misguiding their people. The Arabs produced thousands of codex warning of the serpent Shaitan and his cunning ways of making man and women fall short. It is safe to say that we can identify at least one non-humanoid being that is in fact interfaced with our life cycle. And this is only one, but there are many more. Thus, we should be able to establish that we are not alone. Reason 2. The Maya clearly show they had already pledged allegiance to a group of masculine serpents. The serpent races are just as vast as our own. Many of the serpents are on a collective mind, thus they are really out to accomplish their own agenda and stop at nothing to see it through. Humans are looked at as a source to most of them. They are supremacist warrior class. Also, some have mated with the human race, trying to protect their hybrids as extended family. Many of the ancient reptilians despised this union, and thus a war has ensued amongst the elders and the siblings. Reason 3. In the Egyptian glyphs, it clearly shows much larger humanoids inhabited the land. They are the Nephilim, bent on world domination and enslaving what they called inferior humans. They exist now in spirit form. This is beyond Alexander the Great and Constantine. In fact, this is where they drew their power and destiny from. They were just human catalysts. Hybrids themselves, although their legends are so shrouded in myth, it does them little credit to the truth of their origin. Alexander was known as the Great Two-Horn, and by the Arabs, Dul Qarnayn, who built the wall. The correct knowledge actually makes your spirit larger. Knowledge is food for the spirit. When this happens, just like fish has gotten too big for its tank, you must move on. This is no different than having a small bike as a child that takes you everywhere you need to go, as your child range is a lot smaller. When you get older, you may need a car, plane, or even a ship depending on where you're intending to travel. The body itself, when developed, is the vehicle to traverse the cosmos, and it must now be prepared to do such a thing. This is a vastly populated territory we speak of, and it contains the experiences you will need to continue growth. We will discover that all the things we have gone through in life have served us to get to that point. It is only of value to realize that since nothing is absolutely still, you must continue to move. This is the nature of our entire universe. Nothing dies. Even if you blow it up, it will still become an infinite amount of pieces, whatever it was before. It is a wondrous age we have entered as we watch the midst of the illusion dissipate. The hot spiral of reality permeates the globe. We are awakening as children of giants from a long slumber, realizing that we have been living a long dream. As a planet, we have seen many ages that are part of a large growth cycle. This is the process of turning dirt into gold. One thing we can be sure of, since man and woman have triumphed through the Stone Age and now meet the end of the Space Age, we most certainly intend to continue on to what is next. Reason 4. From the Stone Age to the Space Age was made to look so easy a caveman could do it. Have you asked yourself where our world is headed next? What do you think organizations like NASA, Lucent, and Sony are really doing with now trillions of dollars? Like a game of chess, you anticipate the player's next move. So we see that it is the age of ether we are arriving into, or simply put, spirit. Now we can begin to do things that only made up the fiction portion of our previous ideas and imagination. The weight of the body, which is now the cube, will be shed and will be open once more to higher senses. We would do well to develop and train these senses now. As we speed up and things take place, it will not be time to practice. There's no doubt that we will experience a new aeon. We are all adepts of motion, alkalites of the flux. We populate the galaxy and thus have solidified our way through the harmonic cosmos. We are vessels of known and unknown energies, untold, being ourselves converters for multiple life forms to assimilate, now not only on Earth, but also in space, as above, so below. This energy field cannot be seen with the untrained eye, but exists all around you as a standing column wave. With the science of sound, which is vibration, we can venture to know that if a large wave is made by anything in a small pool, it will only make the smallest waves speed up and increase in size. Thus the small are supported by the great and coaxed to become bigger. Since these bigger forces are now sending out stronger waves than ever, our choice is that we face that bigger wave. Can we ride it, or will we wipe out and hope to catch another? We can be sure that we cannot be destroyed, because the soul within us, a gift by the Most High, is immortal and without end. But you can be made to forget, which is called the second death. When a person really assimilates the other sentient things in existence, it opens them up to a better understanding of the Most High through diversity. This also allows us to make a sober estimate of ourselves and where we personally stand in the levels of matter. When one remains insolent to a fact of such magnitude, there are sure to be repercussions. Those repercussions cause a supremacist nature, never considering what we think is the top is actually the bottom for another being. We would assume we are on an elevated level, which really does more damage than good, since the subconscious mind factors in that we are poisoning the same air we breathe. So as the most intelligent, we are really the most ignorant. Anything built on that kind of foundation will go through a succession of destruction and chaos. Now we have the Earth's full historical description. When this changes, which it will very soon, everything will be different, fast. My first experience with the others was when I unknowingly started a purification procedure and became enlightened. I had no doubt heard of accelerated thinking and higher abilities. However, my intention at the time was just to seek answers from a higher source. Not to mention trusting if whether a higher source could actually be contacted. I knew something higher existed. That became obvious by seriously taking into account that man did not create man. It's at least mathematically impossible. I had done this by chanting until my body had changed its complete vibrational frequency, which took about 2 hours and some extreme desire. The desire I called HSM, heart, soul, and mind, something I found in the Torah, was worth extracting. It was said that the real formula of contacting the Most High, a focal point to interface with if the One came to such a moment that contact would need to be made. Once I started to activate, all the metal in the room was shaking. I had to remove my watch, belt, and anything that contained metal. I had no idea this was going to be the outcome, and the energy was far more than I anticipated. Thus, I was extremely unprepared and confused, but strong nonetheless. I became the portal for higher selves. As the camera continued to run on my PS3, catching these moments, I knew we had something special. Finally, I had vividly captured my proof of the paranormal. I can only explain it as I went up and came back down very fast, and I could feel the essence of where I had gone inside me, especially in my hands. My friend, who was now my witness, was less prepared. He had also experienced the phenomena by touching me once I reached high vibration. This he had done by accident in fear of the metal situation. This prompted him to grab me and ask me what was happening, like I knew. That caused it to spread to him instantly, and later he said he went down deep into somewhere, saw himself, grabbed himself, and started making an ascension back out with things hot on his trail. He was, what I later figured out, in some lower dimension being ruled by some dominion. This was definitely a result of his current character, although he was given a chance nonetheless. Reason 6. What many ancient tribes have been explaining to Westerners since time immemorial is that we are actually located on a lower plane that is being ruled by various entities. The subplanes are indicated above by triangles in the center. The pictures of beings you see are of various ascended masters or gods who rule different parts of the plane. The 4 outer points are the gates. The Kabbalah reflects the same thing, indicating the planes or spheres or hexagrams. They also served as calendars because the alignment of everything above and below is perfectly in order. Breaking through the netherworld with obviously his Ka in tow, my friend got stuck. How this appeared in our realm was that he looked to me be gone, wacko, done, goosed. I was gathering myself fast, still feeling the strength, but also thinking of the full parameters of just what had occurred. I knew that I had to do something fast because my friend, Fiend, was saying the same 2 words over and over so loud eventually the neighbors would call the cops. He seemed to be in a mental loop. Using the word, I yelled it into his mouth. It was all I could think to do. Later he said in that moment that he saw a light and he was able to hurry to it. That brought him back to this plane. This was my second vivid spiritual encounter. We will now mention with no more delay our source, the exact one, with no equation. Beyond capacity and function, jubilant magnetar disposed in realities self-generated. We swoon in ecstasy as you touch us, we guard thy beloved with our life at no cost. The charge is to admonish the guided with exact knowledge of this time sequence and its mysteries we will expose as they lay bare before us. This is so all things may be made clear, and the path be made level for thy feet. Think not those works of those of my own, nay, I was found by the source, headed swiftly in the wrong direction, and it was then I last visited. In that state I was strengthened by the hosts, who, perceiving in me such a lowly state, but a subtle glow, as we all possess the remnants of the brighter star in our hearts. It is through them it was conveyed to me my mishaps. It was in such joy of returning to the true path, turning from the abyss, that I like ultra rays resplendent, did exhaust plutonium fuel cells so that all in the darkness may know of and come to receive the real light. It was then that I knew that the world could raise its entire vibration by contact with just one person who could hold the frequency. The voice that entered the inside of my head after the charge started to tell me things that I had never read or seen before. I also felt activation of opposite hemisphere of my brain, which came first as a separate voice with a mind of its own. At first I thought I had gone crazy or had broken something in my brain, As I settled down, I realized it was my other half, so excited to be finally heard. I spent weeks on Google checking the information after it was made known to me, and I was fascinated with such a breakthrough, as everything that had been spoken into my mind was accurate, not to mention the hidden things it had revealed. For me, at that moment, I knew there was something they were not telling us. This should be the first subject in school. I imagined how much the encounter would enliven the youth. This is what we wanted. Later, when I was able to enter higher states through simple whole-body breathing techniques, I realized our potential as a species is definitely a threat to anything that seeks to rule over the human race. It would not be possible. The energy of freedom is too great, and when felt, one's life means nothing if they cannot constantly feel it again. If humans were to unlock their true self, thus broadcasting a higher signal or frequency that would permeate the globe, it would merely burn holes in the nets and the webs created to surround our atmosphere. Atmosphere. That's what's keeping us trapped within. They admit the eye can see thousands of miles when there's no atmosphere. This is another phenomena they recorded when in space. This is the time. One is now free to feel and receive the truth from the thin air, which contains a stream of information of now, past, future, and most valuably, who we are. Who we really are is the biggest secret, period. Any wise man thinking on that will agree. What I also felt more than I understood was that it's harder to destroy a planet than it was to keep it in harmony and peace. The planet was so strong, I watched how she took payloads of nuclear arsenals, H-bombs and A-bombs, all while keeping the children snug on the other side of the world, spinning lightly on her axis with only a slight wobble. This is the true food for thought. I was convinced that the majority would want to be on a higher vibration, and I set out almost immediately on that quest. What was conveyed to me then was that many people in our history, all the way up until our current day, claiming spiritual enlightenment, especially the New Agers, were talking to angels and masters, and that had in fact corrupted our world long ago. Many of these beings at a certain point were workers of a much greater force. Thus, they learned various mental and spiritual techniques that appeared godlike to humans. In time, pride, jealousy, selfishness, scarcity crept into the order, and ideas that they should divvy up everything that was resourceful to them became prevalent. This is in part due to the nature of the Most High, which does not watch all of its creations like a micromanager. Once the design is put in place, it's off creating more universes, and in time will eventually take its proper form. However, there are phases in between. The creations make up the entire construct of allowing those in-between phases to be possible. We sharpen each other. As with all things, some beings have more senses and thus more power than others. These beings are oftentimes given the name angels, although their classification is much vaster, and the term angel is far from the word that should be used. Consider this, that the modern angels' names end in El. El is the name given by the Hebrews to their god, which corresponds to our planet Saturn. This means all angels work for El, and this you will see is true on various levels as we go on. You will learn to trace the origin of a name using a system that is infallible. Through the correct procedure, you can seriously have a guide to the universe and a map to other worlds inside Earth Dimension 3. Breaking down Saturn, you have Sat and Earn, or Sa and Turn. The word with the most practical use out of these combination is Sat and Earn. As we go on, you will learn who Sat is. As before, the original name of this planet was El. Thus, the name given in English signifies some type of unity between this being Sat and the other simply being Earn. When we drop the N to see if we can get any more clarity, since the Earn's basic meaning is just something you use to put ashes of the cremated dead in, we find that a place that syncs up, Ur. Ur was known as Chaldea, also known as Samaria, also known as Babylon. History says of Ur of Chaldea, home of Marduk, Chaldean magic, and Necronomicon spellbook, was also the home of a young boy named Abram, later Abraham. According to the story, Abram's father, Terah, made idols known as teraphim, and it was Abram's responsibility to peddle these idols to the people. It is said Abram rejected the worship of idols because they had no power. He later discovered the true God and thus became the father of all mankind, just like that. Logically, this story has to have some type of hidden meaning because its literal definition is preposterous. Although almost all people believe in the literal meaning, they believe Abraham is their ancestral father, even when their genealogy places them somewhere like Africa or Asia. These household teraphim caused much trouble throughout the Bible, even after Abram's exit from Ur. Rachel stole teraphim from her father, and he could not rest until they were returned. A few other similar stories exist like this. It is revealed in the sylphs, serpent spirits of the air, whom I call Siths, inhabited these items and would bring forth oracles of the future. Abraham's wife is Sarah, and his father is Terah. It is obvious the real story here is about the unity of the seraphim and the teraphim, and both being spirit forms. Again, since the Bible is a partial account of various stories, only those who have really dissected the clay tablets are able to cross all these characters back over to their original Sumerian archetypes, along with putting together the details of their story about what went on. When we are simply looking for truth and spiritual growth, this all becomes too much. So many have never researched any of this and are at the altars blindly saying amen. They might as well add Ra after that. It's still the same being. Amen Ra. Blindly, they are dragged about. All of the stories in the Sumerian tablets are retold in the Torah after a few alterations, mainly with the names of the individuals involved. By changing the names, it becomes virtually impossible for the common people of the times, most of whom did not read or write, to realize they were still actually following the religion of the Chaldeans long after being led from captivities. The Hebrews became enslaved by the Babylonians, along with many other nations afterwards. As more cultures are put into the melting pot of Babylon, facts become blurred with fiction and languages are turned into Babel. Terah, Abraham's father, and Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, are so close together in spelling, it begs one to wonder what is meant by all this. You will soon see that many of the stories being told are the events of crossbreeding that took place with mankind. Amazingly, many ancient nations such as the Phoenicians had no written language or culture of their own. Instead, they borrowed from everyone they conquered. They altered the original cultures and the languages of these people, saying that they were perfecting them. What audacity! In the Western world, we credit our language, English, with much of our symbolism, like the phoenix, our current death and resurrection doctrine, and many other things to the Phoenicians, who were really the Philistines. Philadelphia was the original state capital of the United States. The biggest mistake a conquered people can make is to begin to imagine that they were never defeated, thus placing their trust in the assailant. We are seeing the results of that now. Our government, spiritual leaders, and instructors have been telling a multitude of lies, many without the slightest knowledge of it. Some are sworn traitors avowed to something much more sinister. We mistakenly have trust the same system that once brutally annihilated everything that had its own will so they could indoctrinate their falsehood. Reason 7. There are traitors amongst us with phenomenal resources that have avowed to something more devious than can normally be conceived. Left unchecked for centuries, they have finally come to the conclusion of an agenda scheduled for the near future. Who will face them? What now has to be done in order for us to discover our true potential is we have to put our real past back together. During the times pharaohs, czars, kings, and shahs despoiled the lands, they found it most important to alter the history, culture, and language of the people they conquered. This is how they gain monopoly over social and spiritual power, the later being the controller of the former. Most of these factions served the unseen hand far back in our history, so they generally have the same agenda. Removing a person's spiritual belief in themselves leaves them powerless. All of the mysticism has effect based on the belief of the wielder of such power. In ancient times, many had such exemplary belief in their internal power, symbols and talismans, they were difficult to conquer, much less indoctrinate. The tyrants of ancient times sent entire armies to subdue them, and often entire armies were laid to waste. Many eluded those armies by going underground, deep into the mountains, and some left this dimension. After all, what does killing mind-controlled soldiers really solve? The greatest adversary to the human race has been the human race. No matter how much evidence we find for links, devils, aliens, spirits, and various other life forms to the corrosion of our natural state, in all of these stories you will find human traitors that gave them access to our inner circles. The entire human race was a collective of brother and sisterhood, capable of maintaining contact with one another across entire planetary systems. We were grouped more commonly as all humanoids, not black man, white man, yellow man, etc. It's virtually impossible to break apart from the outside anything as strong as human will. This book is not about pointing the finger. This book is about understanding your own original state, how it was altered, how to grow back from it, and even excel beyond its original potential. At this moment, we are in a degraded state, and it is only pride that keeps the individual from admitting this. Power now lies mostly in monetary wealth, not spiritual essence. One will always pass away, and the other is eternal. Common sense is not common. This may sound a little confusing, especially this early on. However, the earlier you see this, the better. When they decided to make the names of the planets in English, they really did begin to turn things in the opposite direction. Searching for other names indigenous tribes use for planets will turn up almost nothing. Some may think this is because in ancient times we had no knowledge of the cosmos, and of course this proves to be untrue. We are told the Sumerians, Egyptians, and a few indigenous tribes from Africa have the only details of the names given to the planets in ancient times. Whatever the case, we can be sure that what we call the planet Saturn in modern times may not be actually referring to the planet with the rings, but more of an idea of evil Sat brought forth from Our consciousness, when not hindered, will always look to the sky for answers. Our spirit is from the sky, or rather far in space, while our bodies are indeed flesh and will remain here as dust. When we innocently inquire about the names of planets, stars, moons, wanting to know more, we get the names that are tainted with deception. The vibration of is that of an animal, and of course so-called early man depicted the entire cosmos as animal forms, rather than the much greater concept space stands for, which is beyond normal life on Earth. It's highly unlikely we will find a horse on the moon, but it's not stopped them from naming quadrants of the moon mare, like nightmare. Reason 8. Quadrants of the moon are called mare. The normal commoner would pronounce it as it sounds. Esoterically, it's pronounced Mary. The names of the spots on the moon are riddled with deep significance to its origin and use. Unlike most modern church participants, those initiated into various magical societies evoke angels and spirits all the time. They do this by various means. One key element involves drawing perfect stars inside of circles or squares. A symbol drawn is physical proof of one's intent. A perfect star is often made with a tool used by the elite called an angle. The word angle is an anagram for angel. The tool itself is shaped like an L. That's right, L. If you notice when drawing a star, it consists of straight lines, and straight lines are opposite to nature, which itself is composed of spheres and circles. The body itself contains no straight lines. These straight lines are known as masculine, while the curved lines are feminine. It's known that fleshly beings are categorized as feminine despite their sexual orientation, while heavenly beings are known as masculine due to their strong ethereal nature, which can even withstand the force of being close proximity to the sun. Reason. An angle, the tool seen below the Masonic G in the shape of an L, is used to draw straight lines, while the protractor above is used to make the perfect circle to create talismans. There is recorded knowledge of 1/3 of the angels in the sphere of Saturn rebelling. Those fallen ones came to Earth and intermingled with women, thus creating the term mankind, meaning kind of like man, but not entirely. No matter how fictitious this may seem, it is in fact true. These beings go under the name of Rephaim, Nephilim, Anunnaki, Titans, Giants, Danites. Along with their offspring, they've made up legends of various mythological creatures of various titles. This resulted from the union of angels of not only women, but also of animals. These offspring became known as demigods, meaning half god, half man, or animal. They possess various powers which caused the indigenous tribes of the time to worship the supreme creators, which was far from true. The head of the fallen angels would place demigods over the people to rule them in a hierarchy or pyramid structure. They would remain in contact with the demigods from their habitations in various constellations such as Orion. Ancient Aram indicates the name of Orion originally being Nephilah, or meaning Nephilim. Orion is depicted as a giant man for this reason. There will be lots of Orion sinks as we go on. They have guided much of what we have seen in the media as children growing up until this very day. As a child, I remember watching a cartoon called Fraggle Rock, which was all about the life of the Fraggles, especially their encounters with giants called ogres of the land. In pre-Christian Scandinavian, Orion's belt is known as Friggle's Rock, no doubt the origin of the name of the cartoon. There is a heavy amount of Scandinavian in our language. Reason 9. The daughters of Cain, who the fallen angels had companioned, conceived, but they were unable to bring forth their children, and many died. Of the children in the womb, some died, and others split open bellies of their mothers, coming forth by the navel. They thought evil continually, and God bore with them for a time. The Kebra Nagast. Entire material and ethereal kingdoms below the third heaven were erected and hewn for their spiritual and physical residence. The task of building these lofty havens fell to the humans in this world and the one to come. What a cruel treatment. Expansive kingdoms the slaves did build, but the fact was that the humans were in the lower dimensions with a bad case of memory loss, only being allowed at times just to worship the god and bask in its false light. Those were the favored ones. The other ones lived much worse than when truly alive in unity with the Most High. Thus, these lower planes became known as Netherworld, Arulu, Amenti, Demat, Elysium, Sheol, Hades, Oz, the Matrix, Imperishable Devachanic Plane, Malkuth, Maya, Lemura, a place where injustice was allowed to rule through Igigi, Neters, Balaam, Valkyries, mares, and manes for a time, since everything has its place in contrast. Reason 10. Man has been the constructor for these gods, building them high places so they may enjoy. What the humans may have gotten in return are lifetimes of being a servant with little reward. Their structures are always placed on ley lines to control the energy in the area. In order for many regions to be free, some building must be removed from the ley lines. They are binding the energy of freedom and suppressing clear thought. In history, when structures bind the ley lines for too long, cataclysms occur and shake everything off of them.